I have a framework that I guide my clients, 4 pillars of scalability. And
Okay.
it's interesting, it maps pretty well to the 4 stages that you just described. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think a lot of times there's fundamental truths built into
Yeah.
different people's framework. So when I look at what does it take for a business to be scalable, I'm looking at 4 things. Pillar number 1 is traction. You need a consistent and repeatable way to get new clients and customers. The second thing is profit. You need to be able to deliver your goods and services in a way that leaves enough profit on the table that you can reinvest that profit into growth. Pillar number 3 is capacity in order to be able to take on more volume as the business grows. And the fourth pillar is innovation, which is, do you have a consistent way to implement new ideas and strategies? So when I run my clients through my scalability assessment, my primary job is to figure out which of those 4 buckets is their weakest link right now. It goes in that order. You need traction before you focus on profitability. You need profitability before you focus on scaling capacity. And you need all of those 3 things in place before we start thinking about innovating the next idea. So my job is to really figure out what of those 4 stages or pillars are they in? And then once we figure that out, we're diving in even more deeply to figure out what are the specific areas that are either bottlenecks or sources of inefficiency or sources of lack of profitability that are holding them back from being able to continue growing in that arena. So we dive in to that area, find the weakest links, strategize solutions to solve those problems, and then off to the races.
So why do you love the operational side so much? Because a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs are like, they're strategic thinkers. And the operational side is, as you said, is the most labor intensive, the hardest area to really optimize and make efficient because it's managing people. And a lot of entrepreneurs don't want to manage people. They want to think of the next big idea. They don't necessarily want to get into the weeds of interactions and dynamics of people. Why do you love this area so much?
I went to school for engineering. Like I'm
Right.
an engineer at heart. Um, I'm the way that my brain works is very systematic. I'm constantly looking in the world at how puzzle pieces fit together, right? So this idea that I can look at the components of a business and figure out how do I put these pieces together in a way that is consistent and repeatable and scalable, it's just a big puzzle for me. What I get my kick out of is going into a situation and it's complex and it's messy and it's complicated. And I got to figure out how do I put this together to get to the answer. And you get that kind of adrenaline kind of kick when you get that answer and you see the aha moments. It's my favorite part is when my clients see the aha moments. That's just like
Yeah.
what gets me out of bed in the morning. And it's also just where my natural core competency gifts lie.
So how do you innovate your business and not be in the operations of your business?
Good question. I think there's a little irony to this, right?
I
But
wondered if there was.
because I'm a scalability consultant,
Yeah.
what my clients desire is not necessarily what I desire. So when I chose to start my consulting business, not only was I earnestly and still am motivated to help my clients and help them succeed and fulfill all of their promises, their personal agency, their positive change, um, but I was also really keenly aware of what I wanted out of my life, right? And I wanted a business that served me rather than me serving my business. And I see that with clients all the time, right? Of their business ends up running them rather than them running their business. So what I've chosen for me, what that means for me is that I really enjoy being able to take on a small number of clients, go really deep, and impact really foundational change. And I've chosen to do that without scaling to a large team. So
Right.
when I think about innovation for me, the areas of innovation that I'm focused on are how do I add more value to my clients? How can I create methods, frameworks, and service offerings that benefit them the most more
Yeah,
so than necessarily innovating on my operational tactics, which of course I have because I'm a dork and I want to build out my CRM custom and automate it, integrate it with LinkedIn and drive all my engagement metrics back so I can see what's working and what's not. Like I do all that stuff, but I do that because I'm a dork and it's fun. I'm not necessarily doing all of the operational system building for my own business for the purpose of scale. It's for the purpose of up my brain so that I things just run on repeat and I don't have to think about that stuff and I can devote my brain power to my clients.
amazing. Can you give an example of a client that you've transformed their business and worked very closely with?
Sure. Some of my clients I work with for a matter of months, very project based, come in, figure out a system or process that's not working, fix it, and move on. Other clients, we do that, and then we work on the next problem and the next problem and the next problem. So I'm very fortunate that some of my clients have been with me for years. One that comes to mind is a small boutique marketing firm that when they came to me, they were running marketing campaigns on spreadsheets. They probably had 400 different spreadsheets for every single campaign they ran. There was no central visibility. They couldn't find information. There was redundancy in process, and it was a real challenge and a pain. For that business, the first process that we built was let's create a centralized database of all of your contacts. This is a college marketing agency, so it relied upon being able to activate college kids on campuses to do social media marketing, influencer marketing for major national brands that want to reach college markets. So let's build out the recruitment engine. Let's create a centralized database of 50,000 college students that we have. How do we reach them? How do we recruit them? How do we activate them? How do we mobilize those campaigns? And from there, we built out systems for project campaign management, CRM and scoping, other processes around approval mechanisms for content. And we really built out the infrastructure piece by piece over time. And what that's resulted in is them probably 4 or 5xing their business at this point. And it was it's been incredibly rewarding. I now work with that client in the capacity of a fractional chief operating officer, and it's really rewarding seeing them go on that kind of transformational journey that I've seen with some of my other clients and past businesses. So it's a lot of fun.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. What myths do founders believe that you need to challenge when we're talking about growth and scaling?
Well, we already talked about one of those myths of what it takes to be successful, and it's more than an idea and hard work. I think one of the other, not necessarily myths, but thought conventions that I see in the entrepreneurship and business echo chambers quite a lot on the topic of scalability is that scaling means one thing, and it means growing large and fast. That's not what scalability means to me. Scalability, by its kind of core definition, there's kind of two parts of the word scalability. And it really comes down to the capacity to change in size, right? Scale is size, the ability part is the capacity. I think way too many businesses are focused on the size part of that sentence and not enough on the capacity part, right? So rather than focusing on size and how do I get big or how do I grow quickly, what if instead we focused on the capacity size of that sentence? What is your ability to change in size? And that's all about control, predictability, replicability, consistency. If I can give you more control over your business, then I can give you the levers to be able to choose how and when you grow in size or decrease in size at times. Like when you're in control, that's ultimately, I think, what a lot of my clients are looking for. And that's really where I'm focused because a lot of the people you hear talking about scalability may be people in sales and marketing and how do we get clients and how do we create that pipeline and do all these ads or whatever these marketing tactics? And that's all great. That's pillar number one, traction. You need that. But what happens next? What happens once you have the customers? Let's focus on profitability. Let's focus on efficiency. Focus on control and how you're scaling capacity. And then ultimately, let's talk about innovation. So that I wish there was a lot more focus on that control and ability size of the sentence and a less focus on growth for the sake of growth.
Yeah, and you make a really good point because a lot of companies, as you say, think about I want to get bigger, I want to get bigger, but they don't have the infrastructure. And sometimes I've seen companies fail because they've grown faster than the ability of their employees and their people in their team to be able to grow at that speed. And when you do that, then obviously you're not delivering, and then that can be a spiral down for companies. What is the role of investment in the clients that you work with? Are some of these bootstrapped and grown that way, or are a lot of your clients
Mm.
based on investments?
It's a good qualifier of the question because when you even said the word investment first, I was thinking of something else,
Or
right? And that's the
funding?
funny
Let's
thing.
say funding. Let's say.
That's the funny thing about the word investment. I think that's the right word is investment rather than funding.
Okay.
Most of my clients have grown organically. So they're still either 100% or majority owned by the founders, and they've been able to fund their growth through sales and profit. That's the most common area because typically when you are taking on external investment in the form of private equity or venture capital or otherwise, that's coming in one of two places.